Hey friends, it's Gloria. Welcome back to another video, or welcome if you're new here. Today I'm going to be doing a book haul, and I'm sitting in a different location than usual because, one, I'm getting good lighting, and in front of the usual bookshelf, I don't always get good lighting. I'm in my living room, and I have a book cart. This is the newest addition, part of this haul. I'll go over that in just a second. So yeah, I'm excited to have a secondary filming location when needed. Also, because I have 58 books to talk about today, my bookshelves look completely destroyed, and I will be returning these books to those shelves once I'm done with this haul. So I thought filming here would be a nice change and would look somewhat nice. So we'll get into the books in a second, but I wanted to mention this cart. Yes, I bought myself a book cart for Christmas. This one I got off of Wayfair. I know a lot of people buy theirs from IKEA and from Target, and for some reason I decided to go with Wayfair because it's yellow and I really wanted a pop of color, not just a neutral cart. But I really like it. It was easy to assemble. The only thing I don't love is that these bins themselves are plastic, which I don't know if all of the carts have plastic bins. The sides here are metal, but the bins themselves are plastic. That's not a bad thing though, and it doesn't really look like plastic. And the color is a little bit brighter than what the camera's picking up, but still, I love it. It's fun. I also ran out of shelf space, so I needed a book cart. And it's looking a little bit kind of empty at the moment. That's just because some of the books I took out for this haul. So in this book cart, the goal is to have library books. I only have them on one side, but there's room for more in the back. This cart is also holding some books that I want to prioritize this year. So these are a lot of the books that I mentioned in my 12 fiction books to read, 12 nonfiction books to read, 12 classics to read, new to me authors I want to try in 2022, and all of the other TBRs. If you're interested in any of those videos, my TBR playlist will be linked down below. So a lot of these are books that I own that I want to get to at some point this year, and you know, if they're here, I kind of will look at this cart, hopefully draw from them. So that's the goal with this cart, and it usually sits along this wall right here, but you know, I thought for the video, just turn it so you can look at it. Now, on to the books. 58 books. These are books that I acquired in December and January. So in 2 months, I acquired 58 books, which is insane. I have a problem, I'm willing to admit it, and you know, we'll just move on. But 58 books. However, I only spent $33 in total, which averages out to around 55 cents per book. A lot of these books I get for 50 cents from my library. I work part-time at the library, so I go to the Friends of the Library section. I just can't help it. And then a lot of these are from little free libraries, and some of these were gifted. So I didn't spend, you know, that much money on them. But, you know, I don't want to be a hoarder, so I need to calm it down. I don't know when that will happen, but let's get into the books. As usual, I like to categorize by genre because it's just easier to organize my thoughts, and that way if you don't care about a certain kind of book, you can just skip ahead to whatever ones you like. My two largest piles, of course, are historical fiction and nonfiction. I have 29 historical fictions to talk about, 10 nonfictions, and then some miscellaneous piles that I'll get to. And just another quick little disclaimer, I do not read synopses of books very often. Most of these were either just mentioned by some person, or I like them because of the cover, or just have heard of them elsewhere, or honestly just sometimes I'm like, this looks like historical fiction, I probably will like it because I like historical fiction. So for some of these I will have absolutely no idea what they're about, and if you have read any of these, please let me know your thoughts. I always want to know down below. I trust you guys. Let me know if you've read it, let me know if you liked it, let me know if you hated it. Any feedback is welcome, and without further ado, let's just get started. So the first 7 books here I have to mention, I'm just going to get out of the way. I'm not going to linger too long on these because these are all books that I have read before, and when I have absolutely loved a book or really enjoyed it and I want to own it. So I've kept my eye out and I found these for very cheap or free. Now I own them and I really like them. So I'll just mention briefly Big Little Lies by Liane Moriarty. It was such a fast-paced, fun, enticing, engrossing read, and I read it in like one day. A recent read I read in January, and that is The Life We Bury by Askens. I actually read this and then found this at Goodwill for like $1. I'm excited to own it. It was a fantastic mystery thriller. Where the Crawdad Sing by Delia Owens. I read this a couple years ago now. I originally gave this 4 stars. I feel like I need to reread this because I honestly don't really remember too many things about it, but I know that I really enjoyed it and everyone loves this book, and I was one of the people that did enjoy it, so happy to own it. I mentioned this next one in a December vlog, and that is The Nature of Fragile Things by Susan Meissner. A 2021 favorite read, historical fiction. Absolutely loved it. Happy to own it. We'll probably reread this in the future once I forget about some of the details, and we'll definitely be loaning this out to friends. 3 nonfictions left in this little pile. The first one, Know My Name by Chanel Miller, another 2021 nonfiction favorite. I listened to the audiobook, which was excellent, but happy to own the physical. I potentially see myself coming back to this and also loaning it out to people because I think more people should be reading this. And these last 2 in this little pile just are a great pairing. They go together very well, and that is Becoming by Michelle Obama and A Promised Land by Barack Obama. I've read both of these. Both audiobooks are fantastic. I do love the physical books though, because they have actual photographs that the author included and add a bit to the story that they are telling, but I am very glad to own these. These were both great books. This next little pile, I have 4 books to mention, and these are all books that I'm adding to my bee book collection. If you don't know, I live on a farm. I sell honey for a living. My dad is a beekeeper. I grew up around bees and honey and all the things, and I have this weird obsession to collect all the books with bees on them. So a couple of these are gifts and a couple of these I bought, and I am excited to get to them someday. I will say a few of these are out of my comfort zone, but I'm willing to read them for the bee vlogs, which I hopefully will have coming out at some point. This first one I purchased from that huge Barnes & Noble hardcover sale after Christmas, and that is Small Favors by Erin A. Craig. I saw this book pop up on a few people's favorites, but those people usually read young adult fantasy sci-fi books, and I don't, so I'm a little worried about this one, but the cover is pretty cool. I'm a little scared of it, but I'm excited to try it. This one, totally out of my comfort zone, but again, picked it up because of the cover and title, Requeening by Amanda Moore, and this is a collection of poetry that has to do with motherhood, but it is all told from the perspective of the queen bee, which is kind of unique, so I'm excited to try it. It's a tiny little poetry collection, and we'll see how it goes. This one was a gift for Christmas, and that is Honey and Venom, Confessions of an Urban Beekeeper by Andrew Coté. About a beekeeper in New York City. Love a good nonfiction memoir, love the subject matter, excited to get to this one. And this next one, I just want to say a huge thank you to Jessie for sending me a little gift package that just absolutely warmed my heart, and it felt so nice, and it was just the sweetest thing. She sent me a message saying she found this book in a little free library, and that is Kissing the Bee by Kathe Koja. Look at this interesting cover. I think it's pretty cool, and it's a tiny little book. This book was published in 2007. This is a young adult hard-hitting contemporary, which again isn't usually my cup of tea, but I'm willing to try it for the vlog. And also, as much as I love the dust jacket, without the dust jacket, it's also really cool. It's like gold foiling and has like fun edges. Anyways, love it. Such a good addition to my collection. She also wrote a sweet card that I'll be using as a bookmark, and then she sent me a little Burt's Bees chapstick and these little plant stakes that you put in plants, and one of them said be kind. You like put it in your little plant, and I have some thriving plants, so I'm excited about this. Thank you again, Jessie, for these sweet gifts. It made my day, so I appreciate it. So moving on, before we get into the huge piles, I'm gonna just go through these 8 books that are kind of completely random. They weren't enough to have their own categories. So first up, the one classic is Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen. I will be reading this for the first time in December. Stay tuned for a whole reading vlog about that. But I decided to go with this beautiful Wordsworth edition. Chantel from Chantel Reads All Day inspired me. I was eyeing which one to buy, and I didn't want to spend too much money. And this one, I just love a naked hardback, and I thought it was really pretty, so I decided to go for this one. Although there's so many other beautiful ones out there, but I'm excited to read this, and we'll be picking this up today, actually. It's on the agenda. These next 2 are really well-known middle grades. The first one is Pictures of Hollis Woods by Patricia Riley. This is a middle grade about the foster care system, and I've heard incredible things, so hopefully we'll pick it up in middle grade March. This next one, Fever 1793 by Laurie Halse Anderson. I remember reading this in school. I don't remember much about it. It has to do with the pandemic. It's a popular book for good reason. I'm hoping to reread it again, potentially middle grade March, or just whenever. My first rom-com that I found in perfect condition for 50 cents that a lot of people love, People We Meet on Vacation by Emily Henry. I know a lot of people have either loved or hated this book. Mostly loved. I have not read a contemporary romance yet. I feel like I should try one just to see. I was thinking about maybe in February for, you know, the month of love, but my TBR is very large, so we'll see if I get to it. I want to give it a try. This next one, I don't really know why I picked it up, but let's talk about it. That is The Book of Two Ways by Jodi Picoult. I have a few of Jodi Picoult's books now. The one I am most eager to get to is actually down here. It's The Storyteller. That one I'm the most connected to, and I have a few other ones. This one, again, just perfect condition, so I couldn't pass it up. But reading the premise, I'm now unsure. It's about a woman who's on a plane, and there's an announcement that the plane is crashing, and in that terror, her mind goes to an old flame that she used to have a thing with, and she thinks of him, and so she decides when the plane ends up crashing or whatever happens, she decides to maybe go rekindle that flame instead of going back to her husband. It's usually like not the kind of thing that I'm into at all. I don't like books about adultery, and it just doesn't really sound good, but let me know if you've read it. Is it worth reading? Is it worth picking up? If not, I'll just probably pass this along. Next up, I am excited to try this author in 2022, Lisa Genova. Still Alice is probably her most well-known book, all about Alzheimer's. I really want to get to it, so happy to own it and hope to get to it soon. Another author I've heard great things about, and that is Jane Harper. This is Force of Nature. I know some other books of hers, The Lost Man or The Dry, some of those titles. I don't know if it's all a series. I don't think this is part of a series. Couldn't tell you what this is about, but it is like a mystery, survival, kind of suspense kind of book. I'm assuming this last one in this little stack of books made it onto my 12 fiction books I want to get to in 2022. That is The Glass Hotel by Emily St. John Mandel. I've heard mixed things. This book also very much scares me. I loved Station 11. Don't know how I'll feel about this one. And honestly, her new book also sounds a little bit too far-fetched and weird for my personal tastes. So we'll see, but I do want to give it a try. Chugging right along, let's jump into nonfiction. I have 10 books to mention. 2 of them are spiritual Christian nonfiction. The first one, A Praying Life by Paul E. Miller. We're actually going through a whole prayer series in my church right now and just found this book. Really want to get into it. I am kind of in a revitalized season of prayer right now. I'm excited about it, and I have been unexcited about it for a very long time. So it's kind of a really cool change and cool season that's happening. So I want to dive into this one while I'm going through this shift. So yeah, very excited about this one. Hope it's a good one. Let me know if you read it. This other Christian nonfiction our church gifted to us because me and my husband recently became our community group leaders. We have like a group of friends that are all involved in church, but we meet on Tuesdays and we just hang out, eat dinner, chat, go over all life things and just do life together. And since we are now in a position of leadership in that kind of setting, we were gifted this book, and that is Strengthening the Soul of Your Leadership, Seeking God in the Crucible of Ministry by Ruth Haley Barton. Don't know much about it, but this is required reading for all the leaders of community groups in our church. I believe we will be discussing this book in April, so we'll need to read it by then, but excited to learn some things. The next nonfiction I picked up is Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. I consider myself an introvert. This is on like the top nonfiction self-helpy books to read, so I thought I would give it a try. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. I don't know. This next memoir I picked up, it is a 2021 release, I believe, and that is Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford. This author's father was in the prison system, so I believe it is her experience with having an incarcerated father. I just heard really good things. It's also a really short read. I actually really want to get to this in February, so we'll see. This next one I found in a little free library, but it just seemed so interesting. That is Revolutionary Mothers, Women in the Struggle for America's Independence by Carol Birkin. All about the mothers and women during the Revolutionary War time period and like the start of America. Sounds very interesting. I feel like I don't know much, and it's a shorter nonfiction, which I like. I like that it's not like a big, fat, scary book, you know? So don't know when I'll be picking this up, but excited to get to it whenever I do. This next author I am so eager to read from, and that is Erik Larson, and this is The Splendid and the Vile. This is a saga of Churchill family and defiance during the Blitz. I actually really love to read about the London Blitz, at least in historical fiction, so I'm excited to dive into a nonfiction about that very specific moment of World War II history. Erik Larson's an author that I'm dying to get to in 2022. Another World War II book I've heard fantastic things about, and that is The Boys in the Boat by Daniel James Brown, an epic true life journey to the heart of Hitler's Berlin. I believe this is about an American rowing team during the Olympics during World War II when the Olympics were held in Berlin. Excited to learn and just heard that this book is impeccable. This next one, again, I picked up because it's nonfiction. It was receiving some hype, well rated, but I'm a little intimidated by it, and that is The Code Breaker by Walter Isaacson. All about code editing and the future of the human race. If I'm honest, I don't totally care about like genetics, a little bit out of my comfort zone and not like the most compelling nonfiction topic that I would love to read about, but this book was such highly rated and highly praised. It made it on like some of the top nonfiction lists of last year, so we'll see when I get to it, but again, I just couldn't pass it up. It was right there. This next one, I read the historical fiction by Melanie Benjamin that came out last year of the same name. This is the nonfiction account. That is The Children's Blizzard by David Laskin. January 12th, 1888, in the American prairies, a really epic, crazy blizzard snowstorm hit the area and a bunch of people died. They were not ready for it. It was a problem with the weather system at that time in America, and a lot of people were just unprepared. And the historical fiction wasn't my favorite. I ended up giving that one 3 stars. Just wasn't really compelled with any of the characters, but I'm excited to read a nonfiction account of that event. And then finally, I picked up the autobiography of Eleanor Roosevelt. I've yet to read an autobiography of like an important historical figure, and this one I've heard fantastic things about. One of my good friends loves Eleanor Roosevelt's biography and life story, and I would love to know more as well, so excited to read this one. All right, so 29 books left, all historical fiction. Let's get started. I broke them down somewhat into categories. We got World War II historical fiction set in England but not World War II. We got historical fiction set in totally different countries, unique, diverse perspectives, and then we got historical fiction set in the US in various time periods. And again, a lot of these I have no idea what really they're about, but I sort of just looked at the flap and looked at the date and put them in categories. Let's start with World War II. I've read quite a few great World War II historical fictions. I don't necessarily only gravitate towards them. A lot of them I find kind of cheesy and not always the best put together. So out of this list, I'm not entirely sure which ones are impeccable, amazing standouts and which ones are just kind of like, you know, so we'll see. But I have them here, and if you again have read them and absolutely love them, please let me know, because then they kind of move up in my priority list. The first one we got is The Last Bookshop in London by Madeline Martin, set in August in 1839 in London during the Blitz. A book about books, that's all I'm gonna say. Then we have Bridge of Scarlet Leaves by Christina McMorris. This is set in the US, in America, in Los Angeles in 1941, about an American woman who falls in love with the son of Japanese immigrants, and on the eve of their elopement, Pearl Harbor gets bombed. Her husband then gets sent to a Japanese internment camp, and their love story throughout that experience. This one sounds really good, really heartbreaking, but I haven't really seen too many people talk about this book, so let me know. Next up is The Paris Architect by Charles Balfour. This one I mentioned in my Buzzwordathon TBR possibilities, and a few of you mentioned that this book was really great and outstanding, which now has me very excited to pick it up. But it is about a architect living in Paris when a wealthy Jew hires him to build this apartment for him to hide Jews. But I've heard great things, so now I'm excited to read this one. This next one is a perfect example of a book that I picked up solely because I knew it was World War II, but I did not hear anyone else talking about it or know anything about it. The Woman in the Castle by Jessica Shattuck. I mean, as far as cheesy World War II historical fiction covers go, this one is not too bad. It's got some foiling. It does have a plane, so you know it's World War II. But from my understanding, I believe this is about the woman in Nazi Germany when their men were Nazi officers sent to the war. They hunkered down in this castle and kind of lived their lives together. All I know is that Amanda from the Curly Reader gave this, I believe, 3 stars, so it was an average read for her. Next up, we have The Last Train to London by Meg Waite Clayton. Again, all about Nazi-occupied Europe and a woman that is smuggling children out of the Nazi occupied areas. Could be a really good one. I have 2 more here by the same author. We first have The Light Over London by Julia Kelly and The Last Garden in England by Julia Kelly. This one I think is a newer release. These are both World War II historical fiction set England. I don't really know anything else about them, but let me know if you read them and if they're any good. This next one I'm actually really excited to get to, and that is The Gown by Jennifer Robson. I just love a good fictional take on the royal family. I think it's pretty fun. It's just a fun thing to read about for me, and I'm also very excited to try this author. I've heard great things, so this one is definitely higher on the excitement list of this historical fiction pile for sure. Next up, I have Hannah's War by Jan Eliasberg. It's all about a woman in Germany who's on the brink of scientific discovery, figuring out how to split the atom. And then it's a dual timeline, also set in New Mexico in 1945 and Berlin in 1938, about women scientists getting showed up by men. I'm assuming maybe a bit feministy in during World War II, not entirely sure, but I think this cover's pretty cool. Then we have The Winemaker's Wife by Kristen Harmel. So I did not have success with my first Kristen Harmel, The Forest of Vanishing Stars. I'm still willing to give more of her books a try. I've heard really good things about this one. This one's set in Champagne in 1940, so in France, and all about French Jewish people and people hiding Jewish citizens, as set on a vineyard, I believe. Intrigued to give this author another try. And finally, for World War II, I have Her Last Flight by Beatrice Williams. Also, this is a second chance book for me. I read Our Women in Moscow by Beatrice Williams in 2021 and didn't really like it all that much, but I want to give another one of her books a try. This one is all about a journalist that goes to Hawaii to interview a famous pilot, and it is set during 1947, so I guess after the war, but potentially still goes back in time to look at this man's life during the war. Again, don't know, but I like that it's set in Hawaii and maybe goes all around the globe because it's a pilot about a journalist. I do tend to like characters who are journalists in books, I think. let's get 7 more books out of the way that are also all set in England, I believe, for the most part. First up is Poldark by Winston Graham. I have watched this TV miniseries adaptation and I have really enjoyed it. I'm currently making my way through the Outlander series, but my goal is when I finish that, I will probably be itching to pick up another one, and I think Poldark is the way to go. I believe this is also a longer series. This is the first in the series. It's set in Cornwall, England, and it starts in 1783. Another one where I have watched the first 3 episodes of the show and fell in love, but then couldn't keep watching because I didn't have the right subscription, but I found out that it was a book and I'm so excited, is Belgravia by Julian Fellowes. Also, really am so excited that Julian Fellowes is an author and not just the creator of Downton Abbey, which is one of my favorite shows. So very intrigued about this one. British high society, a whole bunch of drama unfolds, but it sounds really good. This next one is basically a classic at this point, and that is The Time Traveler's Wife. I have not read it. I have watched that movie adaptation, and I believe there's another adaptation coming out soon. I've heard the book is better than the movie. Time travel is involved. I believe it's set in England, but I could totally be wrong. Could be set in the US for all I know. I then have 2 books from an author that I've heard great things about, but I have not read, and that is Kate Morton, The Clockmaker's Daughter and The Distant Hours. And if I'm honest, I couldn't really tell you what either of these are about, but I've heard good things about this author, so let me know if you read either of them. Which one would you rather me pick up to read, to give a try? I'm actually really excited to read this next one, and that it's Florence Adler Swims Forever by Rachel Beanland. This is set in 1934, and it's about a woman who wants to swim across the English Channel, and it's a bit of like a dysfunctional family story. This was on my summer TBR that I never ended up getting to, but now that I own it, I am very excited to pick this up in the summertime. I feel like that would be a great time to read it. This one is both set in England and America, so it's a good transition for the America pile that we will talk about next, but that is The Lighthouse Keeper's Daughter by Hazel Gaynor. I just saw that Krista from Books and Jams recently read this and enjoyed this. Have not read from this author before, but me and her have very similar reading tastes for the most part. I am excited to try it. It's set in Northumberland, England in 1938, as well as Newport, Rhode Island in 1938. I'm assuming it's about a lighthouse keeper's daughter. Next up, let's talk about 6 historical fictions all set in the US. First, we have another Krista favorite, and that is This Tender Land by William Kent Kruger. It's set in the 1930s on the banks of Minnesota's Gilead River. I believe it's a bit of a coming of age. I believe it's a slower paced book, so we'll see how I fare with it, but I've heard incredible things about this author and about this book, so I'm excited to try it. Next up, completely random, not entirely sure why I picked it up, but we have The Healing of Natalie Curtis by Jane Kirkpatrick. This is set in 1902 about a woman heading west, and music is somehow involved in this story. And I believe this author is a Christian fiction author. I'm not really drawn to books that are set in the West. Well, I shouldn't say that because one of my favorite books, Where the Lost Wander, is set in the West. And I don't totally love when like music or art are a big part of the stories, but I want to give it a try. This next one I've heard fantastic things about, and I actually have already hauled the sequel, not knowing that it was a sequel to this book, and that is The Kitchen House by Kathleen Grissom. This is a slave narrative set on the turn of the 19th century on a tobacco plantation in Virginia. Heard it's fantastic and a very moving story, and I am very excited to read it. Next up, I have A Well-Behaved Woman by Therese Ann Fowler. This is all about a young woman who becomes Mrs. Vanderbilt, and her husband's great legacy and all of the things that they end up together in their world of wealth and status and privilege in the US right after the Civil War. And I don't know too much about the Vanderbilts. I did visit the Biltmore estate in Asheville, North Carolina, and that was really fun, so I should know more about them, but I'm excited to read this one and learn some new things. An author that I will definitely read in 2022, I have The Chelsea Girls right here, and I also have The Address, and then I picked up The Dollhouse by Fiona Davis. This is set in 1950s New York City, and I've since learned that each of her books features a main historic building in New York City. So this one is all about a famous hotel in New York City. And finally, historical fiction set in the US, I have The Lincoln Highway by Amor Towles. I also have his other book, A Gentleman in Moscow, that I need to read and will read. It's on this cart. This one though, it's a chunky book. It's about some young boys on a train headed west, kind of like living their life, trying to figure things out. And Lincoln Highway is a famous like road in the Midwest. I think all of these things could be wrong though, but it's also set in 1950s America, and this author is well loved by many, so I'm really eager to try it. We're almost there, guys. I have 5 books left, 5 diverse historical fictions all set in different places than the US or the UK. The first one is The Stationery Shop by Marjan Kamali. Isn't this a gorgeous, just a gorgeous cover. This one is set in 1950s Tehran, and that's all I really know, but I've heard some fantastic things about it, and just simply for the cover alone, beautiful. Next up, I have The God of Small Things by Arundhati Roy. This one is set in India in 1969. It is a family saga, forbidden love story, and a piercing political drama. Not really the kind of book that I would gravitate towards, but I've seen it coming around. This is a bit of a modern classic at this point. Please let me know if you've read it. What were your thoughts? I am slightly intimidated by it. Don't know when I would pick this up, and to be honest, don't really know why. I've totally purchased it when I could have checked it out from the library, but again, probably was just sitting there for cheap and I couldn't help myself. This next one is The Shadowland by Elizabeth Kostova. This one is set in Bulgaria, about a young woman who I believe discovers something and then she's trying to track down a family to return that thing to them. I like the setting. I like that it's in a different country. I'm sure I will learn some things from this book. This next one, I have A Long Pedal to the Sea by Isabel Allende. I'm very eager to get this also this book. Very eager to get to this author in 2022. This one was very popular last year in the Goodreads Choice Awards for historical fiction. She's a very prolific author at this point, has written a ton of books. I think this one is her more approachable historical fiction. A few of her other books seem a bit more magical realism, which is a bit scary for me to dive into. Magical realism usually isn't my cup of tea. This one is set in 1930s during the Civil War in Spain, so excited to read more from that perspective. And then finally, to wrap it all up, I have Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. This is a book that I meant to read in December and in January, but I still haven't. This one is set in Iceland, based on a true story about a woman who's accused of being a witch, and there are some witch trials that happened. I heard this book is pretty depressing and maybe sad. Again, have heard amazing things and would absolutely love to read this. Hopefully soon, but probably not, so I'll just probably save it till like next winter. Oh, so many books, so little time. I know I need to spend the next like half hour putting these all back on my shelves. But I appreciate you guys sticking around and watching this wonderful haul. Again, let me know if you read any of them and your thoughts below. Thanks again for spending time with me today, and I'll see you guys in another video soon. Bye!